Serious? What's the most terrifying thing that actually exists? Please like and subscribe to support this channel. Probability time. I'm not afraid of time running out, or the moment my time has run out. What I am terrified of is not experiencing all that life has to offer and using that time to its fullest. At 23 years old, it's easy to get into the adult rhythm. Wake, work, supper, workout, personal hobby, relax, friends, chores, pick one, go to sleep, repeat. But what gets me is sometimes, I'll be driving home from work, and think, I'm only 23 once in my life. Each day I am getting one day closer to dying, and it could even be tomorrow. I am not living life like I am dying. I only get one shot at this thing, and I'm going to go home and play video games? So I try to think of something, anything, to do or learn to try and capitalize on that. Often it's hard, and I can't think of anything else to do, and I can't help but just count down the hours until I have to go back to work. But it really is a terrifying feeling. A midlife crisis of sorts. I realize that I only have a few hours a week to really experience life, since the other rest of the week is spent being a slave to society. It's probably the worst thing about being an adult. We share 96% of our DNA with chimps and evolved on the same planet. Our closest relative cannot understand the concept of asking others questions for self-discovery. If there is life out there, it is likely to be so vastly different that we may lack the ability to perceive it. Alternatively, it could think so vastly differently that we may appear to be background noise to it. We also may lack the fundamental understanding to ask ourselves questions it would consider simple, something an equivalent 2-year-old of their race does by instinct. Aliens could exist, and we may be meaningless to them, similar to how ants elicit little interest to us. Think about the most horrifying political life view you can. Something that just scares you to your core that other human beings could think that. Then realize that there are those that do. Vehemently. It is their core belief and they will do everything they can to make sure it's how things go. Sometimes the group is bigger than others. But rest assured and horrified that it's a group and they're working on it. The fact that the human mind can turn against itself. The amount of disorders found in humans. One day you might never be able to fall asleep again, or get a compulsion to destroy yourself. You might start hearing voices, or believe that your food is poison, that there is a demon sitting on your chest at night, or suddenly want to kill and eat other people. Or perhaps it'll happen to your spouse and you'll wake up to a knife at your throat. Why haven't we observed any of this in animals? What if our entire idea of evolution is wrong, and we're slowly destroying ourselves? What if the awaited alien super race is never going to arrive? Because somehow intelligence and self-awareness equals ever more complex neuroses. Parkinson's. So many people don't realize that it isn't just shaking and loss of monitor control. You lose the ability to swallow properly, which makes even swallowing your own saliva difficult. You lose your ability to speak clearly. A fair amount of those with Parkinson's also don't shake. They may walk backwards without their own control over it. They fall often. Those with late stages often develop dementia along with their Parkinson's. So not only can you don't control your body anymore, you can't remember your family or where you are. My father has Parkinson's. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's like watching someone slowly be trapped in their own failing body. He still has his mind but has trouble performing even basic tasks some days, like talking or swallowing. I don't know enough scary animals, but what terrifies me most is the NCAA. Essentially a corporation that amelia entertainment out of teenagers and young adults who aren't given the time or money to fight back. Those who fight against any NCAA standard gets kicked out, loses their scholarship and their life dwindles into nothing as they realize they've been forced into sports their whole life and know nothing else. Those who comply only have an extremely small chance of getting into sports professionally, and most are left with the same confusion and loss as those who tried to fight. TLDR, the NCAA is a scary and seemingly invincible organization. They make American boys entertainment monkeys and sometimes drive them to suicide. Yeah, that's pretty much the worst thing. Because all of your supposed fellow citizens just let it happen. Until it happens to them. Then they understand, but they've already been discarded into the refuse pile. Anaphylaxis paralysis. My mom, who is a nurse, was stung by a bee and became paralyzed. She could breathe, labored, but couldn't move or speak. She finally was able to communicate when EMS was trying to intubate her. She could sort of make her breathing change, and a very intuitive paramedic noticed and was able to get her to acknowledge that she could breathe without needing a tube. She said it was the most terrifying thing. They were moving her arms and legs and she couldn't feel it. She couldn't control her blinking or saliva. When she finally was given enough epinephrine to save her life, she said hearing all of their words, knowing all the medical stuff, to her was absolutely scary. Like they thought she was a goner and were prepping her heart for a code and the like. She's never been stung since, but she keeps multiple EPI pens everywhere. I don't know if people here know about who Videla and Massera were. These men were one of the last dictators of Argentina, and probably the nightmare of 100, if not more, of people. During their military dictatorship, practically 30,000 people were taken off of their own houses, by no reason apparent other than free thought. You couldn't even talk in public because soldiers would come out of nowhere and take you, and people will probably never hear of you again. Horribly, we don't even know what even happened to those persons. Some were tortured, others just executed, kids were sold to families and other things. There's a well in the north where at least 300 corpses lay 100 meters under the ground. If you had between 15 and 20 during these 20 years, you had asterisk to take the military school, no matter what. And what's even worse, during the Falklands War, people around 19 years were sent there, while well-trained soldiers stayed to bring terror. Tanks rolled on the streets and you could be the next to just disappear, because you said something they didn't like. There's a museum that was built where they imprisoned people, and you can visit the same place they were tortured, or raped, or whatever they did. Going back to that just scares me the fuck out. Literally couldn't sleep for that time. The elephant's foot, at Chernobyl. Basically a mass of steel, concrete, and uranium melted together from the heat of the radiation. It's radioactive enough that you'd start to feel the effects within a couple dozen seconds of standing in the same room, and your cells would literally start to burst after a couple minutes. Pictures of it come out distorted, and it can only be photographed using a mirror. It'll last around 100,000 years, long after any civilizations that exist now will have died out. Basically, the closest real-life thing to a highly cursed object. It's scary not because of the threat, but just the fact that it exists in the world with us. Diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, or DIPG. It's a form of brain cancer that typically strikes children between the ages of 4 to 9. It's an inoperable tumor, and it is terminal upon diagnosis. Parents have to watch their children lose the ability to walk and talk. Children are prisoners in their own body. Once gymnasts and avid athletes, they then struggle to walk in a straight line. They can have stroke-like symptoms, weakness and spasms on one side of the body. Typically, one eye strays. By the end, they lose the ability to talk, and can suffer regular seizures. Then, they lose the ability to breathe. Often, they struggle for days or weeks with labored breathing, gasping for breaths. Sometimes, they are conscious and aware as this is happening. The parents are with them, watching their breathing grow choppy, and break for periods of 30 seconds to a minute. Eventually, though, they give out, and they die. In my mind, that is the worst fucking thing in the world, and it bothers me that it doesn't get as much attention as it should. No child, no parent, no sibling should have to suffer through that. Pancreatic cancer. My dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer on October 20, 2016, and he passed away on December 30, 2017. He originally went to the doctor because he was having stomach pains reminiscent of a time when he had drank some bad water, and he was instead informed that he had a vicious death sentence that he had already begun serving. The rest of his life was spent dwelling on his disease. He was constantly wondering what was going to start the dying process, sometimes listing all of the possibilities, and out of all of his predictions, the actual situation that led to his death had little to do with the cancer, more related to the medication. He went from being 6 feet 5,280 pounds to 6 feet 4,185 pounds at the time of his death. There was no stopping or slowing it down. When it was ready to spread, it spread. Being stuck out in the middle of flat, wide open nowhere surrounded by metal buildings in a lightning storm. Dead before the information registering that you're dead reaches your brain. I'm 100% sure that I'm psychologically fucked for life now because of that day. No need to even have the shrink take a look. It's all just a matter of not wanting to know how fucked I am and being able to accept that I'm fucked. A little disease called ALS. You start with a little bit of paralysis, in a finger or two, or maybe a hand. Then it spreads. Both hands, both arms, legs. Then it spread some more, so you can't talk. You can breathe and blink. For now, you lie in a bed, generally a hospital bed. You're trapped in your own body. Then the muscles begin to atrophy from lack of use. They literally begin dying, and you feel every bit of it. You're fed shakes and pain meds through a tube in your stomach, but the pain is all-encompassing. Your body is rotting and you can do nothing, not even communicate. After many months your lungs start weakening. You slowly suffocate and nobody can stop it. Nobody even knows you're dead until they see the blue on your lips. If diagnosed with ALS, I strongly suggest suicide. If a loved one is, kill them if they can't kill themselves. There is nothing I regret more than allowing my mother to suffer this fate. I would gladly spend the rest of my life in prison if it meant she didn't have to die like that. Her biggest fear of all was dying of suffocation, and I didn't know she would go like that. There is no worse death. My oldest is in his 20s and struggles with Asperger's and mental health issues. Mainly severe anxiety, depression and insomnia. He has synesthesia, so it's like he is always tripping and hallucinating. That is his normal and he functions well with the right meds. He has gone through a really tough 6 months of visits and hospitalizations. We have entrusted our vulnerable son to the professionals and hospitals, while we advocate for him the best we can. He was recently home from a hospital stay, when he clearly was not ready to be able to care for himself. That happens a lot. We have an agency coming to our house every day to check in on him. He was not doing well and it was decided by the professionals that he needed to be back in the hospital and mentioned a place he has been to before. My son freaked out, started screaming and saying that he can't be near the rapist. That he didn't want to see this man's penis again. He said it out of such fear. 3 professionals and peer counselors witnessed this with us. He was terrified and begging to go back to the place he just got home from even though he hated it. We had to send him back to inpatient care and we've been promised he will not be placed in a facility where the person our son was raped by works. I am a rape survivor and a survivor of sexual abuse. This shit happens every day. I have to trust he is cared for and not abused. I have no trust left. This is a cruel and evil world. I hope this psych professional is caught. I doubt my son's case will be the one to do it, but an investigation has been opened. I am stunned and will contact the county's ombudsman tomorrow. I feel sick that we thought he was safe and getting help. I don't know how to be at peace with him being in such a vulnerable place again. This world is so cruel. Being completely paralyzed. I remember reading about a guy who was stuck in his own body for many years before they figured out that his mind was still in there. They thought he was brain dead because he couldn't even move his eyes around. Just the thought of being totally trapped is terrifying. Anyway, they found a way for him to communicate and he told stories about how nurses had molested him and how relatives had told to him they wish he would die unknowing he could hear everything. Ophiocordyceps unilateralis or the zombie fungus. It infects insects, most commonly ants, and burrows into the body and brain of the ant. The ant is technically dead, but the fungus burrows and changes the ant's systems to effectively infect more, aka a zombie ant. It feeds off of the ant and eventually sprouts more and bites down on undersides of leaves that allow it to spread spores to nearby ants. The zombie fungus has been known to destroy entire colonies and has apparently made several breeds of ant extinct. Ants of today have evolved to know if a member of their colony is infected. They'll forcibly carry the ant away from the colony to prevent further contamination. To me, it's kidnappers, honestly. Not being kidnapped, but having a loved one kidnapped and never hearing of them again. Imagine you will never know if she is still alive or locked up in a cellar, and any minor reminder of them would have you fall back into the hole of sorrow again. You can escape most terrible things by death, but knowing they could someday return just to find out you are dead somehow puts responsibility onto you. I don't know if I could ever recover from something like that. There's a lot of really scary answers already posted, but what about magnetars? Magnetars are under so much stress that the crust could fracture on 1,000s and thousands of light years away and it could still fry us here. About 50,000 years ago, the crust on SGR 1802-20 fractured and the force released was so powerful that in 2004 it partially ionized our atmosphere on Earth and put a lot of satellites out of commission for a while. In case you're feeling existential about this, AXP-1E 1048-59 is only 9,000 light-years away and can do the same thing. We won't even know it's coming until it's here. Space. Think about this shit. There are fucking things out there that occur on a scale we cannot even quantify with known mathematics. Black holes aren't even the worst. The collisions of stars produce explosions far beyond anything we could create on this planet, and it's happening everywhere. There are fucking rays that are hurtling through space that could instantly kill every living thing on this planet. Ignore the possibility of alien life, wormholes, dark matter, cross-dimensional travel, and the other stuff we are just barely beginning to understand. Space is without a doubt the scariest thing in this entire universe. It is also, simply awe-inducing in its beauty, but one cannot help but feel some fear at the sheer scale at which things happen out there. Closing parenthesis.